Tom is a policy officer in the non-financial reporting, DG FISMA European Commission. And while I'm delighted, and I think it really builds on what Curtis was saying, the role of the policy maker in framing this agenda and what does it actually mean and what is the market going to see. So Tom, are you with us there, please? Tom, great to see you.
I am. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you perfectly. Great to see you, Tom, and thank you for joining us today.
Hi, I've got a bit of an echo as well, but I think I can cope with it.
Well, look, I'm going to be dropping off in a moment, so should stop then. Just to kick us off, Tom, if I may, and we're delighted that you're with us today. Can you just give us a kind of a snapshot as to the progress and direction of travel in the non-financial reporting space from an EU Commission perspective, please, Tom?
Yes. We have, as you know, some established principle-based rules already in existence in the EU for the last few years. And pioneering though they may have been, we've come to the conclusion that they're not adequate to face the challenges and the speed of change that we now need. We've recently put forward a proposal for what we call a corporate sustainability reporting directive. So a piece of EU legislation that would substantially strengthen and revise those existing sustainability disclosure rules. The centerpiece really of that new proposal would be mandatory EU sustainability reporting standards. Now, it's critically important, of course, that those standards meet the EU's needs in terms of being consistent with our own sustainable finance agenda, and indeed being consistent with the political ambition that you find in the European Green Deal, amongst other things. The equilibrium, though, that we need to find is to make sure that those standards, while meeting European needs, also build upon and contribute to further convergence and developments in international reporting standards at a global level. That's where the TCFD comes in and becomes particularly relevant for us. The EU has, since the beginning, really been a very strong supporter of the TCFD. What feels like a long time ago, but in fact only 2 years ago, we issued a new set of guidelines, voluntary guidelines, on climate reporting to accompany our existing legal framework. And those guidelines very explicitly incorporated the recommendations of the TCFD. In fact, could even go so far as to say that was the whole point of those new guidelines, to help companies to understand how they could, on the one hand, meet the expectations expressed in the recommendations of the TCFD, and at one and the same time, comply with the existing legislative requirements in EU law. And Curtis has made reference to the work that we did together, also with SADA and a number of others, in order to develop those guidelines. More recently, and I think again Curtis made reference to it, but it's worth repeating it, the recent communique from the financial ministers and central bank governors of the G7 made a commitment to move towards mandatory climate reporting based on the TCFD recommendations. And the EU obviously was closely involved in the development and the negotiation of that communique, and very much supports that conclusion. Now, when we come to our new latest proposal, what we have called the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, we have integrated deliberately many of the concepts and terms that come from the TCFD recommendations. So there are concepts in our new proposal that are not really in existing EU legislation. And this goes down to quite a basic level. Our current legislative requirements don't mention opportunities, for example. They mention only risks. They don't mention strategy by name. They don't explicitly reference the fact that companies should talk about how their governance arrangements for dealing with climate and other issues. So those and a number of other important concepts which we have lifted from the TCFD, you will now find in the European Commission's latest proposal. That, of course, will be further elaborated upon in this critical process of standards development. The Commission's proposal is more detailed than existing legislation, but it remains relatively high level. It is in the technical development of standards, which will take place over the next 12 months or more, that we will see the real integration of all these concepts. And again, the intention here is not to reinvent the wheel, but to ensure that EU standards build upon what is already out there, what is already in existence, and what works. And the TCFD is inevitably part of that. Before I stop, Stephen, if you'd allow me, just a few words on what you might expect in the future, because I think it's probably important, or useful at least, to visualize what we're likely to see. We're likely to see the integration of TCFD recommendations and other material, in fact, into EU standards, rather than an explicit piece of EU legislation that says, dear companies, you are required to do the TCFD recommendations. So it's going to be a slightly more subtle process than that. I think it's fair to say also that the TCFD will be a minimum, and I think that fits with what Curtis was indicating in terms of the TCFD wanting to provide a basis in any case on which to build. So I think it's likely that EU standards, while they would integrate all the key elements of the TCFD, they may require companies to do more. In particular, and in any case, the TCFD is about climate only, and it is already evident that EU sustainability reporting standards will cover the broad range of sustainability issues and won't be limited only to climate. Lastly, a word about the proposed timetable for all of this. I don't think it will surprise any of you to know that it's going fast. The Commission's proposal indicates that we could adopt EU sustainability reporting standards by the end of 2022, for companies then to use through financial year 2023, and to publish reports based on these new standards for the first time in 2024. That timetable is based on a number of assumptions, including assumptions about how fast EU member states and the Parliament agree on this proposal. But in any case, it reinforces the message that things are moving really very fast in this area. I think I'll stop there. If there are questions, challenges, I'm very willing to try to respond.
I think there's always challenges, Tom, but I think thank you very much for that, because that's really given us a great insight from a Commission perspective, from a policymaker perspective, building on Curtis's introduction to TCFD. And as you said, you know, as a minimum TCFD, as that minimum. And I think it's very important for firms to realize the timeline. It is, as you said, it's quite ambitious. We all hope that it actually met within that timeline, which would be super. But if I can ask, just as this process is playing out, Tom, And from the perspective of policymakers and regulators, in the interim, what is it the key action that they could do to encourage businesses, such as here in Ireland, but across, in this case, the wider EU, to engage in the TCFD or to engage in an increased reporting disclosure as we wait for these things to come through from the Commission? And what should they not do, I suppose? So it's kind of carrot and stick here approach, if I may, just as in the interim, as we wait for the Commission rules to come through, please.
I would pay attention to what the big initiatives are doing and saying. There are obviously, and there have been a multiplication of different market-led really initiatives, attempts to address the fact that not enough companies are providing the kind of information that users say they need. But I think, and particularly for companies that are beginning to look at this at the first time, it can be fairly overwhelming. Like, my God, where do I look? There seems to be too much out there. Look at the big things. Look at the TCFD. Look at the Global Reporting Initiative. Perhaps look at SASB. And if you keep your eyes very much on those, together actually also with the 2019 voluntary guidelines that we produced, you are unlikely to start doing anything that will not find its place one way or another in future EU standards.